Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Tantalus Systems, a channel empowering the electrified future with smart grid solutions. We're always having the pleasure to be joined by Chief Executive Officer Peter Londa. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure, especially considering how enlighteningly entertaining and just exciting the future is for the future of basically utilities. And we're going to be breaking this down in pieces because first and foremost, we're kind of moving out of the first half of the year. We're going to be talking about that. I want to kind of get into the utilities of the future that was picked up by Forbes, a blog article that you guys released. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Q2 results coming up. So kind of just frameworking this a little bit, what can you tell us about kind of your goals, what we achieved in the first 6 months of this year so we can figure out where we're going?
Sure. So I'll tie back to some of the Q1 financial results, which are publicly available at this point. We came out of Q1 and articulated a few things for investors, one of which tied to reporting for the first time on our annual recurring revenue at just under $8.7 million. That's US dollars. Secondly, we reported a record quarter in orders with over 16 million US dollars converted out of our pipeline. And we shared strong revenue growth, over, I think, close to 16% growth year over year, Q1 of this year versus Q1 of last year. And incrementally to that, Kyle, we shared that our gross profit margins remain very strong in the upper 40th percentile, despite a lot of inflationary pressures that a number of companies are witnessing. So, from our perspective, a very successful quarter that ties into the growth trajectory of this business and the effort by utilities to really accelerate their spending to prepare for the future and help them navigate through an increasing number of circumstances that are very challenging.
Yeah, it's extremely resilient. And just to kind of framework that, because you are announcing your Q2 results, when can we expect those to come out?
Yeah, so we're excited to share that the Q2 results will be released after the market closes on August 9th. And while I'm not necessarily in a position to really share information before we make it public, I'd say we continue to witness strong activity out of our pipeline. So we'll be looking forward to sharing some of those results. We continue to make progress towards driving and increasing our annual recurring revenue year over year and quarter over quarter at this point. So investors will get an update on that. And I think that the trajectory of the business from Q1 has carried forward here in Q2. So really excited about the position we're in.
Yeah, it's incredible during these tumultuous times, proving that the utility industry remains stable. And considering you guys are kind of like a growth vector within the utility sector, I wouldn't mind kind of just touching base on the utilities of the future that were picked up by Forbes from that blog article. Can you kind of just framework us where you think we're kind of going in the future here from the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months? How do you see this kind of evolving?
Yeah, absolutely. And Kyle, there's one other aspect for investors to think about, so maybe we can come back to it as it relates to what's happening with the US dollar and how that impacts us. Maybe we'll circle back to that after your question. But we published an article a few weeks ago called "The Utility of the Future," and the premise behind the article is really articulating a set of challenges that you and I have been talking about now for some time that are confronting utilities. That those three challenges, in summary form, are extreme weather. Here in the United States, we see every day yet another press release about utilities that are confronting extreme heat. We're now seeing that surface in Europe. We're seeing it in really even portions of Canada. But extreme weather continues to wreak havoc on the reliability of the grid. Calls to decarbonize, right, are forcing utilities to prepare for what is expected to be a doubling of the amount of power they need to deliver, while simultaneously being mandated to reduce fossil fuels that they've relied on for a long time. And the third is the electrification of everything, particularly with respect to the electrification of transportation. And the assumption that people will, in buying an electric vehicle or a school bus or migrating fleets at the municipal level, that the utility will just automatically be able to power those vehicles. That's a gross assumption to make relative to where the grid sits today. So it's really those three challenges: extreme weather, calls to decarbonize, and then preparing for the electrification of transportation, that are forcing the hands of utilities to do things differently. And so within the utility of the future, we talk a lot about the sustainability or the sustainable utility from a financial, operational, environmental, and communal perspective But what that article really starts to elicit and draw out is how data from our technology in particular is enabling utilities to really prepare for the future and become sustainable. And it's data that we pull from the field, right? We deploy endpoints on behalf of utilities. We connect to those endpoints through networking and wireless communications. And then from that communications and those endpoints, we're extracting 30 billion data points a year today on consumption of power and power quality metrics. And it's from that data that we can build recurring revenue streams for our investors through software and analytics that then provide the visibility to utilities to figure out what should they do in extreme circumstances when a heat wave hits. How can they leverage automation and connected devices for command and control to predict what the grid's going to do relative to what Mother Nature is throwing at it? And so it's the utility of the future codified in that article is helping utilities through our technology migrate from the traditional view of just being a power company delivering power, but also very quickly becoming a data-driven company or a data company. And what we really like in that article, and I think what Forbes picked up and what we've gotten some great feedback and some coverage on, right? Utilities are always asked to track kilowatts, megawatts. That's how power is measured, right? From our view, it's not just about the kilowatts that are delivered, it's about the kilobytes of data that tie to each kilowatt. What can we do with that data? How do we access it? And then how do we analyze it for the utilities? And so it's that theme that's in the utility of the future that you'll see a lot more from us, and certainly got the attention of Forbes magazine and a few other periodicals that are going to pick up that article and treat it as on the front cover of a number of periodicals that are coming out. So we're really excited about it, and it's an important message.
It's incredibly insightful in this kind of evolving sector that I feel like is still broadly overlooked when we're comparing tech companies. Utilities, I think, kind of get underrated in that aspect. But you also mentioned Forex. Being a Canadian company here, I wouldn't mind just picking your brain a little bit, considering, the European dollar there has been a little bit rocky with some of the geopolitical events. We're seeing the US dollar come back strong as the interest rates move higher, people move to bonds, GICs, things of that nature, just strengthening the dollar further. How does this affect your business?
Yeah, so Kyle, thanks for the question. It's an important one. Tantalus reports in US dollars. We always have, and we continue to do so, even though we're publicly traded. So our revenue is in US dollars. A significant portion of our expenses and headcount are on the Canadian side of the border with engineers and team up in Vancouver. And so we're getting a little bit of an arbitrage, right? The stronger dollar helps us. But most importantly, right, as I think investors look for safety in inflationary and in recession periods, which seems that that's the path that the global economy is on, certainly here in North America. The utility industry is very stable. They consistently are investing, and they are consistently paying their bills, which puts us in a very good position to grow, even if we end up with some rocky economic circumstances. On top of that, we report in US dollars, and there is strength in our financials as a result that isn't subject to fluctuations in foreign currency. And last but not least, we're getting a little arbitrage here on just the strength of the US dollar relative to the Canadian dollar on revenue in US dollars, most of our expenses in Canadian dollars. So, I think all positive trends to provide a little shelter for investors that are looking to play some of the macroeconomic trends here.
Incredibly insightful. I'm going to pass the question out to the viewers at this point. We'd always love to know what you guys think about all this in that comment section below. Consider subscribing, because as the new, obviously the earnings results come out for Q2 and a lot more news comes down the wire, we're going to continue to update you here. But on that note, stay cool, stay awesome. And as always, I look forward to catching you in the next one.